Dr. Norton, I want to walk you through the last decade of my life, okay? I even wrote some of this down to make sure I get it. So 10 to 15 years ago, I'm still exercising like the high school wannabe, like college wannabe athlete that I thought I still was. Every year I was getting a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. And then Atia hits the scene, and he's somebody I have high respect for. Brilliant guy. He's the first guy that said, maybe we need to look at this differently mechanistically. Then I got into Gary Taubes, and then I somehow landed to Asprey. And then everything was about bulletproof and mainline stuff, right? And so then I would cook bacon, I would eat it, and then I would take the bacon grease and dump it into my coffee, and I was mainline. It was disgusting. But here's what happened. I lost a lot of weight. And what I came to realize over time is I would start eating at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And what you talked about earlier was at the beginning, I was probably having 7,000 or 8,000 calories a day. By the time I'd been doing this for 90 days, I looked like emaciated and like I had been left on a desert island for a while. But I was my caloric intake was so low, right? I just wasn't eating that much. But then I moved over to, Baylor and the Calorie Myth, and then I got my own glucose monitor and just started following all these fad diets. Man, here's all the stuff. My wife used to say before we would, at the beginning of every month, before she go to the grocery store, she would just be like, John, what are we this month? Are we like raw vegan? Like, what are we doing? She was such a trooper. High fat, vegan, no carb, no sugar. I've done it all of them. Low grain, all of it. Nothing is more of a third rail. Like me and you could sit here and talk about religious rights and abortion rights, and we get less drama than when you tell somebody don't drink Diet Coke or you should drink Diet Coke, right? So
it's probably true.
What are we supposed to do? Because I know how to read studies, and it's a pain in the butt, and it takes a long time, and it's easier just to scroll through Instagram. You know how to read studies. We do this for a living, and it still gets cumbersome. What is the average mom, just the dad who's just 32 and he's got 2 young kids and he's starting to notice like, man, it's hard for me to bend over now. Is there a way to paint with a broad brush what people should broadly be doing when it comes to eating? And then we'll get into exercise here in a minute. I feel like it's just chaos, man.
Yeah. So there's actually a lot that you just brought up there that's great to go over. So the first thing is people make the wrong associations. And it's just because something worked, it's important to understand why it worked, right? So we don't make the wrong association. So let's take intermittent fasting, for example, which sounds like something you did. People will lose weight on intermittent fasting and they'll say something like, well, see, it's because I was in fat burning mode and autophagy and my insulin was low. And it's like, no, dude, you didn't eat for 20 hours and you just fit it all into a 4-hour window and like, yeah, you lost weight, right? But that is not sexy. That's not what sells people on it because it just sounds like, oh, well, they're just saying I ate less.
Right.
And again,
it sounds a lot like disordered eating, right? So
right.
Yeah, you just starve yourself. Well, congratulations.
And you just brought up something, which is you slowly got heavier, right? Like you lose some weight, regain it, lose some weight, regain it. But over time, you were getting heavier.
That's right.
Right. Okay. Then the next question is, all right, well, maybe some diets are easier to adhere to, right? Compliance is the science. And I really get into it. Like it's like the messaging behind what Dave says with paying off debt, right?
Yeah.
So people say, well, you should pay off the highest interest rate first. That just makes sense because of math. It's like, well, if we were doing math, we wouldn't be in this problem in the first place, right?
That's right.
Because this isn't an X's and O's problem.
It's a psychology
This is not
problem.
a knowledge issue. This is a habits and behaviors problem. Is what it is. So when we look at, there was actually 2 meta-analyses done looking at various different popular diets and seeing, okay, did any of them perform better in terms of fat loss? Also, were any of them easier to adhere to? And the research showed that none of them really stood out performing better in fat loss. And none of them appeared easier to adhere to because adherence appears to be a very individual thing. What's easy for one person may be very difficult for another and vice versa. And I think this is why we have, like, again, so much difficulty because what will often happen, and I'm guilty of this. So I follow something called flexible dieting, which basically I have my protein, carbs, and fats the targets for the day and calories. And I just focus on hitting those. And I try to use, quote unquote, good foods to hit those. But for the most part, I'm just like, let's just be consistent with this, right? Let's make sure we're picking up the big rocks. And like, I thought, because that felt easy to me, because previously I was trying to, quote unquote, eat clean. And here's what would happen. I'd eat clean all week. This is in college. I'd eat clean all week. My buddies would order pizza on the weekend, and I would eat like a whole large pizza, right? And it's like, hey, it's like a budget, right? So like, if you are great saving throughout the week, but then you go, popping bottles at the club on the weekend, guess what happens to your weekly budget? It gets blown, right?
Yeah, right.
Budget still counts on the weekends, and guess what, kiddies? Calories still count on the weekend. So I kind of was like, well, instead of like going ham because I feel so deprived, what if I just allowed myself to eat this stuff in moderation and just tracked it, right? So I started doing that, and lo and behold, it worked, right? In fact, I even did I joke, I did an entire contest prep, and I had at least one ice cream sandwich a day. Now, I'm not saying you've got to eat ice cream. It's the greatest
prep ever.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing though, because that stuff, even though it's tasty, you're getting pretty small like intake for quite a bit of calories.
Yeah.
So I would, by default, as I'm getting leaner and leaner, my calories are getting lower and lower. I'm going to have to adjust the foods that I eat to accommodate for that. Otherwise, I'm going to be really hungry.
Yep.
So again, a budget example is great, right? So if you make $1 million a year, right? If you can pay your mortgage and you can pay your utilities and all your responsibilities, and you set money aside for all the stuff you need to, and then you want to buy yourself a real awesome sports car for $200,000. Is that okay to do? Maybe, right? If you can meet all those other obligations.
Right.
But should you do that if it's going to make you go broke, if you have a small budget?
Right.
Of course not.
Yeah.
Right? Well, this calories is the same thing. If you're an athlete who's, expending 4,000 or 5,000 calories a day, hey, if you want to have a slice of cheesecake or something like that, it's not going to hurt you, because like it's just getting churned up in your daily burn. Right?
Remember that photo of Michael Phelps, his diet?
Yeah.
That gave me so much. I was like, oh man, I play YMCA basketball. I can eat 7 Big Macs then. You know what I mean, dude? That killed me. But you're right. He was burning up 25,000 calories a day.
Right. So,
oh man,
it changes what you do based on that. But really what most people need to do is get consistent.
See, you just use 2 words that I hate: intentional and consistent. I need something better than that. I need a bad guy and a special intolerance, and I need some genetic information. I need that.
The best diet for you is probably the one that you can stick to in the long term and be adherent to. And that is going to be different from individual to individual, and probably the one that feels. So in order to lose weight, you must practice some form of restriction, whether it's counting calories, low carb, et cetera, et cetera. But you can pick the form of restriction that feels least restrictive to you. And that's probably what you should do, because it's going to feel the least taxing over time, because consistency is the name of the game.
And so I want to interrupt there. Just so the listener knows, in my house, I eat a generally low carb, no sugar diet, unless I am mainlining ice cream and gummy candies, which happens. But my wife doesn't. She has many more carbs than I do. And I'm talking about grains and sugars, not salads and things. And so it's as simple as, when she makes dinner, she will make part of the dish without the rice in it, or she'll make part of the dish without the tortillas in it, or whatever. And we've been doing that for a decade now. We've both landed on, and I hear houses divided. That's just people not being intentional, not caring about each other. It's not hard. It takes an extra 3 seconds to not put a tortilla on something, or but it's a matter of what you just said. Here's what works for us most of the time. And I can always look back when I look and be like, I just found 15 extra pounds I didn't notice. And I fluctuate a lot. I drop water pretty quick and put it back on pretty quick. It always comes back to what you just said: consistency and intentionality.